this is touching all parts of our community. I even broke my own leg in 2006, and I remember when I didn't fill out my full prescription of OxyContin, they were calling me and asking me why I hadn't. There has been an aggressive push of opiates into our communities for decades. The introduction of this fake fentanyl, this carfentanil stuff, which is a new level of poison, is difficult to comprehend, just how easy it can kill people. And so we have this challenge right now where we need to get people who are struggling with addictions issues, even people who are casually using, to understand that there is a real concern out there. We're going to have to do some innovative approaches. I begrudgingly sort of support this concept of the vending machines, where we'll be able to get dilaudid pills to those that are on the streets and most impacted by this. But of course, the real solution to all this, and if there is a silver bullet, and it's going to take time, is no barrier housing and a housing first approach. Because what we've failed to do so far is get people stabilized, get people in a place where they're comfortable, get people where they have a chance to move through steps of recovery, and keeping in mind that they will fall on and off the wagon a whole bunch of times, and that we have a process that takes a healthcare-based approach towards addiction and has a compassionate approach towards people's addictions issues.
So I was just at the Board of Trade discussion, and we had coastal health there, and they mentioned that when you have social isolation, the risk to having illness goes up 2 times. The risk to mental illness goes up 3 times. Mental illness is the #1 predictor as to whether or not someone is going to be using substances on the downtown east side. So these are all tied together. So let's look at this a little bit differently. Let's look at the fact that we have a poverty model that forces people down at the bottom, because some people are so afraid that our people might be cheating the system. Let's not look at it that way. Understand there have been studies that say that we are paying as much as $134,000 a year in taxes to support each marginalized person on the street. So if we just raise the benefit to say $20,000, $30,000 from the $10,000 it is right now, and we don't have a system that is suspicious. We don't have a system that penalizes someone if they're trying to get out of the bottom, work an honest living, but help them get out of there. We may turn this tide. But it all starts with not having social isolation, not having a housing crisis. We need to house those that are mentally ill.
So the opioid crisis, mental health addictions, it's a city-wide issue. It's a province-wide issue. But I'd like to talk about the downtown east side to give some context here. When you look at the downtown east side, over $1 billion a year goes into that area every single year. So it's not a lack of financial resources per se. There are also over 200 community groups with smart people that really care about the city and the residents of the downtown east side who want to make a difference. So it's not a lack of people. What I truly believe, it's a lack of coordination and a lack of political courage, which is stopping us from making some serious improvements in the downtown east side and the opioid crisis across the city and across this province. So what we're doing is we've put together a task force of individuals from those 200 different groups, plus people in the community and outside of the community as well. And they're helping us articulate what we should be doing to make that next step. And once they come out with their answers or their recommendations, which will be fairly soon, what I promise to do as Mayor of Vancouver is I will articulate those recommendations to the public, and then I commit to having the political courage to start acting on those recommendations. Because at the end of the day, I do think we have an opportunity to make a serious impact on improving the situation in the downtown east side. And I'm going to carry myself as mayor, not to get reelected, but to do things in a manner where I'm not afraid to be fired.
It's an opioid poisoning crisis. And if this was our food, or if this was our water, we would be taking dramatic action. But we're not. And instead, we're expecting those frontline workers of nonprofits working in the downtown east side, the frontline businesses, and our first responders to have to bear the trauma that comes with watching people they know and care for die on the streets. I believe 96% of street drugs are laced with fentanyl right now, or some derivative. That is a poisoning crisis. We have to deal with it. We have to decriminalize drugs. We have to ensure that people have access to harm reduction. We really have to ensure that we create the kind of treatment centers that when people are ready for them, they're there for them. But more importantly, it's the drug supply we have to clean up, and we have to support our frontline workers. Now, this issue is more complex than just dealing with the crisis at hand. First, deal with the crisis at hand, and then let's put the long-term supports in. We need a mental health strategy in this city, in this country. We don't have one. It's long. We treat mental health as a stigma. We give people, if there is not a social worker for somebody when they're leaving Vancouver General Hospital out of the psychiatric ward, guess where they end up? If there's no supports for them. And so we need to develop a strategy that looks at mental health as a health issue.